Okay, guys. Put down the volume a bit and try to be a bit lower. Let's share the page here, the Sicho. All right, we're learning the Sicho of Parshas Vayigash, Zayin Tevis Tav Shin Yud Aleph. Here we go. Yom Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Vayigash. So this is from the year 1951. It's Shabbos Kodesh Jefnei Siyam Yudav Chodesh Amir's Kadesh. This is the year, and the Shabbos before, the previous Rebbe was finishing, Sei Kadesh for his father-in-law, the previous Lubavitch Rebbe. The Rebbe said like this, based on what we said before in the previous talks, based on the words of the Orach Chaim, that Yom HaShabbos, Koilel, Shabbos includes within it Kol Yemei Shvu, all the days of the week. Shekulam Mekabim Chayusam Yom HaShabbos, all of them receive their vitality, like we've learned before, is from the days of Shabbos. Hanagasam Tali Ba'ofen Hanhaga Yom HaShabbos, and how your week is going to go the further week is dependent on Shabbos. Zeish Levar Akeshav Ashaychas Yom Siyam Amir Sekadesh the Shabbos Parshas Vayigash Kidlakamon. And because this is the Shabbos before finishing the Sei Kadesh on the previous Rebbe, we're going to continue. We're going to try to connect this idea to Parshas Vayigash. V'nois Lazed Rebbe adds, Yesh b'yom Shabbos Kadesh, Yesh b'yom Shabbos Kodesh Zeh Simcha Shel Yehudi. This week is also a Simcha, means that year 1950. Shekadosh Baruch Hu Hereloi Nes, God showed a miracle. B'negei la tzolis bitoi, about a certain person that their daughter was saved. I guess the daughter had a medical condition. La'richas yom v'shalom tovus, to have a long life, the Rebbe blesses. V'chein simcha shal Yehudi shenol deloi bas. Also another simcha. So one person was saved from a medical situation. Another person that had a daughter. Simcha shal chasen sheza'ata nistaime eslei shivus mei mishta. And also a chasen that's finishing his phase of the Sheva Brachos of the wedding. V'chein yom meledus, also there's a person that has a birthday. Shagam in yonim elu, all these things in yonim pratim shel b'nei Yisrael, even though these are individual simchas. Someone survived a medical condition, had a baby, someone has had to just finish their wedding, a birthday, seemingly are private events. Everything's by the divine. And therefore, and all this is connected to Vayigash. The Rebbe is like this: this person that had a miracle about their daughter that went through a medical crisis. What does it mean to have a son and daughter in Hasidic terms? As is known, everything has its source in heaven in the service of God. We've spoke many times that the difference between, what's the idea of a son? A son is the approach of seichel, logic. And a strength that I'm going to do something, conviction to do something. Ish darka lichvosh, the man's way is to conquer. Ubas, a daughter. Moira avodah, that represents the avodah, the service of Kabbalah Sol, of accepting the yoke. Isha kashera, the Gemara quotes that a proper woman, does the will of her husband. Yehudi. But a Jew, that's the way it's represented as a concept. A Jew, a Jew has to do both ways. Bein ubas, both the avodah of a ben, to be a person who conquers, and also to be a Kabbalah Solnik, also a person who accepts the yoke. Even though that demands two separate attitudes. A person who's a conqueror is aggressive. Someone who's aggressive is obviously not a person that could have Kabbalah Solnik, but accept the yoke. And someone who accepts the yoke is seemingly passive. So how do we have both the idea of aggressive and passive in the same avodah? The same person. So Mr. Rebbe says, Mechad Gisa, from one side, Toivim Yehudi, what's demanded from a Jew is Inyan HaBital, is self-nullification, which is the whole idea about Parshas Vayigash, the Bital of Yehudah. Benafshi ka'ofer l'chol tiyah, that my soul is like dirt, like we say every day in davening. is loirak shlilas hagaiva vayeshes. And what does Bital mean? Bital doesn't just mean to get rid of your ego and yeshes, your being. Elegam, hey Aaron, elegam lahaniya chatzida, to put to the side tavasav ritzainasav v'gam sichle. Sometimes you have to put away your desires, your wants, and even your own logic to accept the yoke of Hashem. Will snag al pi Shulchan Aruch, and you have to do what the Shulchan Aruch demands of a person. The Shulchan Aruch demands of a person to do something. You may not want it, you may not like it, you may not understand it, but a person who's a Kabbalah soul has to say, that's what I have to do. B'tech Kabbalah soul, accepting the yoke, which is what Bitul is. You nullify not just your ego, but nullify your wants for Hashem. Gam b'dever she'ein lo makim klal b'sichli, even if you don't understand the logic behind why you have to do something or not do something. V'lo yoid, el shenid meloi, you may imagine, shedaver zeh yigram le'nezik chas v'shal, that it may be harmful to you to listen to the Shulchan Aruch. Sometimes the Shulchan Aruch, let's say in an extreme situation, if someone feels that closing their store on Shabbos is going to be a financial loss, but the Torah says so. Even though you don't understand it, you have to nullify your logic. The last is to do what's expected from you. To accept the yoke. And when you do that, when you get through that test, and you don't allow for your logic to get in the way of the Shulchan Aruch, you're going to see that not only hasn't the Torah caused you damage, on the contrary, it brings you benefit. Not only spiritually, it's also in a material way. So that's one idea. One idea was what demanded from a person, he or she is to have Kabbalah soul. And Kabbalah soul means Bital. And Bital self-nullification means to put aside your wants, your desires, your ego, your logic for what Hashem wants from you. And the other side, the Torah demands from a person an attitude. Toivim Yehudi, what's wanted from a Jew, expected from a Jew, is chayzik v'toikiv, is to have the strength, that even though we're the few amongst the nations, and amongst the Jewish people, the people that keep the Torah mitzvahs, according to the halacha, are less than the people, unfortunately, that don't. And those who are careful to even keep the most refined of the mitzvahs, and to go above the letter of the law. Even those who keep Torah, the ones who keep it to the extreme, those are even less. The sugvas is frimers altveinik. The Rebbe says in Yiddish, the more a person is frum, so to say, the fewer the room, the emptier the room becomes. A person has to have the strength, and the conviction, don't get overwhelmed by the majority. A person will look at the majority and say, the majority of people are not doing this. So why do I have to do it? But you don't get overwhelmed by the majority. You do what you have to do. The Rebbe gives an example. A person may think, so you shouldn't say, conservative. The Rebbe's talking in the 50s. A person may look around and say, most people go to conservative synagogue. So maybe I should go with most people, the majority goes. Other things that are above the letter of the law. If you want to put on a second pair of tefillin, you say, well, how many people are putting on two pairs of tefillin? Why should I put on two? Most people put on Rashi, that's enough. A person shouldn't say, I'm not a great rabbi or an old Hasidic person. Why do I have to be special? I could be like everyone else. Like if I wanted to be a special person, I could have become a rabbi. I could become a great Hasid. I'm a regular person. I'll behave like a regular person behaves. The Rebbe says, a person doesn't go to overwhelmed by the numbers that may be against what you're thinking about doing. So the Rebbe says, only aside from that the Rebbe adds, on the contrary, not only are you going to say, this, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep to myself. No, you go out and affect others. That's what it means to be a conqueror, to conquer another person, to bring another person to higher level of Torah mitzvahs. Don't wait for someone to come to you and ask questions. To be effective on them. To bring them closer to the performance of Torah mitzvahs. Start off being warm, and of course, always be warm and being encouraging. but also to be effective. Not just, it's nice to invite people to your house and give them a nice Shabbos experience, but the idea is also that a person should start becoming more Torah observant. That that person also be diligent and careful in the mitzvahs and to go above the letter of the law. And that's what it means to conquer. Conquer means is to go out there. So a person, what the Rebbe says, what's demanded in a person is to have this kind of tension where on one side you're totally batal, put away, you totally nullify your wants for Torah wants. And at the same time, you take that bital and you become a conqueror, you become a person who's darki shalish lichvosh. The nature of a man is to conquer. The Rebbe adds. This idea that a person needs strength not to be overwhelmed by the majority, on the contrary, to affect them. Who is the first minority out there screaming that there's Hashem? That's Avram, our father. He was alone. Avram was one amongst everyone else. He was one against the whole world. The Medrash says, Shenikra Avram Ivri. Why is he called Avram the Ivri? Ivri means from the Aver, the other side. Hashem Shekola Elam Kulei Mi Aver Echad. The whole world is on one side. Who Mi Aver Echad, then he's on the other side. Avram was totally alone, doing what he had to do, what he understood has to be done. Shekulam Hayu Oiv Devay Zara. Everyone was worshiping idols. V'Rakul Levadai Hisik Derech Emes. And only he's the one who understood of how it has to be done, and he stayed with it. He stayed with what he understood. He knew there's one God. He's the creator. Nevertheless, even though he was all alone, and everyone thought he was crazy, not only did he say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in the way of the truth. And not to be overwhelmed from the world. On the contrary, Avram went out there and changed people. He conquered the world. He stood there and he called out, B'kol Gadol, in a loud voice, to the whole world, to let them know, there's one God, and stop with this idol worship, and we have to serve Hashem. Like it says, that it's brought down that Avram called out the name of God. He didn't just say it. He made others say it. Anyone who passed his tent, anyone who benefited from his work, from his house, from his hospitality, he said you have to bench Hashem. You have to recognize there's a single God. Not only was he effective on them, that they should acknowledge there's a God. More than that, he affected on others. To the effect that they should pass on the message to other people. So one person has so many people you could be in contact with. If you go out there and you make each person that you're in contact with not just a makabel, a person who receives, but a mashpia, right? The idea is to make mashpiyim, to make other givers. So if you give someone an idea, tell them there's a single God, the idea is that that person should go out and send the message to another 10 people, and another 10 people send it out to another. And that's how you multiply the ideas of the single God. And as I feel the gangen say the yarn, and the Rebbe said, he so much kind of said, emphasized to them these ideas of a single God. And he made them also tell others about it. Not just that there's a God in the world. That the world is one thing. And God gives vitality and life to that existence of the world. God is the world. There's no existence outside of godliness. The whole existence of the world is godliness. The Rebbe says in the footnote in the bracket, even though after Avram Avinu taught the world about the single God, there's still many mistakes. It wasn't like he was able to totally change the world. The very fact they stopped worshiping idols. They stopped making sacrifices to idols, even though they weren't perfect, even in the 7 no-id laws. Why did they stop? Not just because they got lazy, because they recognized that Avram said there's one God, so they didn't know how to be perfect God-fearing people. Even though they made mistakes, there's that alone is something positive. And he says, Rambam, like Maimonides said, this is a very challenging Maimonides, has to do with what we were learning in the Gemara this week. In the old publications, censored. There was a censor in the time they published the Gemaras in Vilna. So they couldn't keep, I'm not even sure when the censor started, but they couldn't keep in a lot of the parts of the Gemara because it was offensive to Christian beliefs. So there it says, the Rambam says, Shekol advar me'elu shel Yeshua Notzri, all ideas of Christian philosophy, and for Islam philosophy, is einin el liyasher derech lemelech Mashiach. It's to make the world ready for Mashiach. Because even though it's not our belief, the details of Christianity, and it's not our belief, the details of Islam, but nevertheless, those are the three between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. They all have one thing in common, which that is believing in one God. So the Rambam says that was to get the world ready for Mashiach. This is all from the Rambam. The whole world, or majority of the world, is serving one God. Like the Rambam quotes, it says that in the time of Mashiach, that the nations, everyone's going to have, everyone's going to serve a single God. The Rebbe says, and this is the way Avram Avinu did things, which is Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Efrat, Avram, She'elav, Mesiachim, Kol Bnei Yisrael, Gama Gerim, even the Gerim are children of Avram. The Siman Labanim is a sign of how the children have to behave. Shebnei Yisrael, Einim Sichon Yispal Me'roiv. It's not our job to get overwhelmed by the majority. Not only do we have to stand strong, Aliserim is more than that. We have to be effective, lifol, alacherim, to affect others. How Avram Avinu started in his way of getting the world ready for a single God, even if he didn't affect perfection in the people that were serving Hashem in his time. The Rebbe continues. So what does this mean to us? What is demanded from a Jew is etzloi beis tenuas. We have to have the two seemingly contradict attitudes. To tenuas habital v'kabal sol. In one way, we have to have self-nullification and accepting upon ourselves the yoke. And on the other side, v'tenuas hachayzev katoykef. We have to have the strength and focus. Even though they seem to be a contradiction. You can't hack a person usually who's a person of Bital is not always a person that's accomplishing things. The truth is, the Rebbe says, where does a person really draw the strength of not to be overwhelmed by the world? To be effective in the world. Where's the power a man has to conquer? That itself comes from Kabbalah soul, from Bital. When a person is worried about their image, when a person's worried about their agenda, it's hard to be effective. When you say, this is what I have to do, I have to go out there and affect the world, I have to go out there and conquer the world, even if it's uncomfortable for me. That itself comes from Bital, from self-nullification. That's why, that's the vote of a daughter. The daughter gives the strength for the son. Isha kashera, the Rebbe learns, what does it mean, Isha kashera, a proper woman doesn't do according to her husband's will, but creates her husband's will. She makes the rutzin of her husband. She makes the rutzin of the masculine. The masculine draws from the feminine. The Bital allows for the person to be properly effective. What is the thinking? When a person has true self-nullification and focus and Bital, it's not about you. And the world is not really its own entity. The whole point is that Hashem wanted that we should permeate the world with godliness. Surely, the Rebbe says, how does the world run? It's because God decided how it should run. If that's the case, you have to do what Hashem wants in every situation, and never to think that what God wants could be a contradiction of how it should be. You have to go on the way of Torah. Derech Emes, the way of truth. It's not our place to start making calculations, but the majority says different. But I'm a minority. That's not your business. If this is what the Torah wants you to do, you have to do it with conviction. The Rebbe adds, this idea that it's not a contradiction, but actually strength comes from accepting the yoke. Strength comes from, focus comes from Kabbalah Sol. Is also in the way of the avodah of a man. The man's avodah is to conquer. The Rebbe is like this. What happens when we have a son? On the 8th day, we go through the process of the circumcision. On the 8th day, when do we circumcise our sons? At 8 days old, if we can. Seemingly, it doesn't make sense. The son doesn't understand anything. He can't protest. He can't say, whoa, what's going on over here? Nevertheless, democratia, even in a democratic way, and if you were democratic, you'd say, 1 second, let the son understand first the process of the surgical or the mitzvah of Mila, and then let him decide if he wants to be circumcised or not. You sit down with your son, if he wants to. Like the Ishmaelites, they lumel ben Yud Gimel Shana at 13 years old, they do circumcision. So why don't we do that? What do? We take a son who's 8 days old, can't protest. There's no democracy. There's no democratic process. We just go and circumcise the boy. When we do circumcision 8 days old, that is because we're connecting and we're revealing the self-sacrifice a Jew's supposed to have for Hashem. That's not about the democratic process, and it's not about the conversation. We're revealing, we're not giving, we're revealing that the nature of a Jew is, the teva, the nature of a Jew from his birth and her birth. If you were born a Jew, so what do you want to do? Like the Rambam Paskins, that it's a sure thing, it's not a suffix, it's a sure thing that the Ratzon Amiti, the true desire of every Jew is to give their life over for Hashem. Even if later the child could grow up and you could say he doesn't live the life of Mesiras Nefesh. He's showing everything's the opposite. He would never have chosen consciously, possibly, to do a circumcision. When he becomes older, I don't want to be such a Jew. I don't want. Don't label me as a Mesiras Nefesh Jew. The Rambam said the Rambam doesn't subscribe to that. The toughest poskim was the Rambam. The Rambam was very tough. He took no prisoners. He said it the way it was. The Rambam says it's brought down the laws of divorce. That if a man doesn't want to divorce a woman, so the halacha is a man has to willingly divorce a woman. And if he doesn't want to divorce her, the Rambam quotes that you give him some petch, you hit him until he says, I want to. The whole point is, what's the point of saying I want to? He's not saying he wants to. He doesn't really want to. He wants you to stop hitting him. Because the Rambam says, no, he does want to. He just doesn't understand that he wants to. Because your Yetzer Hara overwhelmed you. But the fact is, and the Rambam brings it la halacha, a Jew wants to do what the Torah says. A Jew wants to be like a Jew. And therefore, there is no possible way that if a real essence of a Jew is revealed, he would say no to a circumcision. Last is called mitzvahs, to do all the mitzvahs. Kipsakt in a Rambam, as the Rambam paskins. Adam hu nefesh, and we show it in the soul. The blood is in the soul is in the blood, and therefore we draw blood in the circumcision to reveal that. We know that a person's life is connected to their blood. And you ready to sacrifice that for God. So why do we do it on the 8th day? Let's do it on the 1st day the baby's born. It's brought down the child should live one Shabbos. So minimum, you could be born on Friday and live a Shabbos, but even if you're born on Sunday, so at least if you're born on Shabbos, you could live one Shabbos. Because Shabbos, what's the idea of Shabbos? Why do we have to go through one Shabbos before Milah? Because Shabbos happens on its own. We know Yom Tov is Mikra Kodesh. We call out, the Jewish people decide the calendar, when is the new month, and therefore we decide when is the Yom Tov. So, but Shabbos, we don't decide. Shabbos happens on its own. Shabbos is not like Yom Tov. That the Jewish people are the ones who decide when there's the times of the month because of when the new month is. And that strengthens the idea that Shabbos happens anyways. It's like, it's a fact. Shabbos is going to come every 7 days, whether you like it or not, whether you accept it or not. That's it's going to be Shabbos. So to a Jew is connected to God, that's the way it is. So by experiencing one Shabbos, it reveals the process of our essential connection to God. And because of that, we're able to go through to reveal within the child, 8 days old, without asking him, that you are an essential Jew, and therefore you're going to circumcise yourself. You're going to be circumcised. By day of Mila, when a person goes through circumcision, Tnuas HaMesir Nefesh, that which is the revelation of self-sacrifice, the highest level of self-nullification and accepting the yoke, that gives the person the ability to never be overwhelmed by the world. Lifal Bailam is in contrary, to effect in the world each dark lichvish, man's ways to conquer. Based on this, we could explain. Rebbe is now going to go into the details of this person who experienced the miracle about his son, his daughter. When God makes a miracle for a Jew, saving this Jew's daughter. Rebbe is saying it's an amazing thing that when you go through in your life something that there is a miracle related to the daughter, it's a sign from God that you have to strengthen the daughter within you, which is the Kabbalah soul. In habit of a Kabbalah soul. And that will help for you to be effective in the masculine side. And your resolutions that hopefully this person took, and we should all take in our ways of accepting Torah. Notwithstanding of how you behaved up until this point. When Hashem wakes you up with this challenge of a daughter, is a sign that we have to do a little Mesiras Nefesh. When we know Shizui Derech this is what Hashem wants. Specifically, when it comes to education, what does Hashem want us? How does Hashem want us to educate our children? The other children, we have to give our kids the Jewish education, and even if it demands Kabbalah soul, even if the price tag is high, even if private learning is expensive, we go out there and we do it because that's what Hashem wants, to educate our children in Jewish education. There is a saying from the Rebbe Rashab, Shemevar, that he explains, that there's a positive to the fact that we're kind of slumbering and kind of in a faint status of the Jewish people in Golus, right? We're not awake like in the time of Geula, of redemption, or awake in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. So, right, we learned the Maimer that Hayinu Kacholmim were like dreamers, right? Api Mashal, like an example. So the Rebbe Rashab explains it. You have a father. Sheesh Lei Banim has children. Shiatsu Farshu. That they leave him, but the father is not so overwhelmed. Again, he's just read it. Basically, the Rebbe is saying is that I think the example of the Rebbe is giving over here is that the Rebbe Shab says that it's an example like a father who doesn't feel the disconnect when your son disconnects from you. You don't feel it if you're in a state of slumber, because had you felt the real separation, then you wouldn't be able to handle the pain. But sometimes the separation, if it comes through a time of like we're under anesthesia, basically the Rebbe is saying is like time of Golus is like under anesthesia, right? If you did an operation without anesthesia, you'd feel tremendous pain. But if you're under anesthesia, so it's kind of, you're under laughing gas, so you don't feel the pain so much. So too, Golus is kind of, we're like in a dream, because if we really felt the separation that we had from Hashem in Golus, we wouldn't be able to handle it. The Rebbe says, I'm the movement, it's understood. It's not, we're not supposed to be satisfied that we're kind of numb when our children don't behave in the ways that we want. Specifically, also, it's only good for the parents to be numb, but it doesn't help the children if they're numb, because then they're not going to change their behavior. Sometimes if the parents felt a little bit of the pain, they wouldn't just let it go. They would try to change the situation of their children if the children are leaving the derech of Hashem. So because sometimes the parents don't feel the pain, they don't act, and therefore the children remain in a bad situation. So the Rebbe says the question is, why is it the Rebbe says, the Rebbe is not blaming the parents. The Rebbe is just saying, but why is it the children's fault that if God doesn't want the children to feel that God doesn't want the children to feel the parents to feel the pain, so He's numbing the pain of the separation when the children don't go according to the ways of the parents, and therefore the parents are not good parents. They're not educating. They're not disciplining their children. So pain. So to be numb, to be under anesthesia, is you don't feel pain, but you're also not active. So why is it the children's problem? Because God doesn't want the parents to feel the pain. We need to have absolute good. Not just that it should be good for the parents, but it should be good for the children. Children should go back in the way of Hashem. The Rebbe says it's important for the children, the parents, not to be numb, not to be under too much anesthesia. We have to do whatever we can to educate our sons and our daughters in the way of Torah, and to prevent them that they shouldn't go and do things that are against the ways of Torah. The Rebbe continues, and we're going to stop in a second. The Rebbe continues. What's this? An example to this? Imagine, very connected to today. Imagine you saw your children about to do something that's mamish harmful to their body. That's going to affect their whole. The Rebbe said this in 1950. The Rebbe says, imagine a parent saw the children about to do something to their body that's going to affect their body for the rest of their life. God forbid. She is darzeru. Take it from me out. The parents wouldn't just stand there in anesthetic status and just be dreaming. They would try to do whatever they can. Not to look at the calendar. Really, maybe it doesn't fit my calendar. Maybe later, another day, we'll talk to our children about it. Do whatever you can. In all ways, in all situations. You would turn over the world to prevent from your children from hurting themselves. If that's the way it is about the body, it's surely about the soul. Allah's come more so. And the Rebbe says it was there. This is what we learned from this week's parsha. Vayigash, for the sake of Binyamin, for one Jewish child. Yehudah went self-sacrifice to save Binyamin. It says that Yehudah approached Yosef. Chazal teach us. Yehudah was ready to do anything to save his younger brother. If you would have to go to war against Yosef, you would. Not knowing it's Yosef, of course. If Yosef wouldn't willingly free Benjamin, he was going to go to battle. Seemingly doesn't make sense. How did Yehudah even think he could fight Yosef? Yosef was the head of an empire. Yehudah was only a few people, 10 brothers. He was the ruler. Even if Yehudah was a great warrior and a strong person, the Medrash tells us that Yosef and his brothers and his sons were stronger than Yehudah. Because when Yehudah tried to stamp his feet and show strength, Yehudah started to wonder, Yosef is stronger than me. How did he even think to fight him? The answer is, this is what Yehudah said. Why did he go in to Mesiras Nefesh to save Binyamin? I have become a guarantor to this child's life. To my father. That if I don't bring Binyamin back, I'm responsible. He took responsibility. Because he took upon himself the responsibility Lahavis Binyamin Liakov, to bring Binyamin back to Yaakov. He was going to go to Mesiras Nefesh to take on that, to actualize that responsibility. This is only for one child. Only Binyamin was at risk. The other brothers could remain. He said, go back home. Binyamin stays here. Nevertheless, just for Binyamin. He went self-sacrifice because he had responsibility. This is the lesson. This is on the bottom line. For every son and for every father and mother. If God placed upon ourselves, and He did, on every parent, the responsibility as parents, for their children, not just anyone's children, is Arav Anar, you have to take responsibility for your children. Even for one child. To make sure that doesn't happen to him what shouldn't happen. Up until the point of self-sacrifice. The Rebbe adds, and we'll conclude here. Yehudah Daika. Why is it Yehudah? The name Yehudah. Yehudah Milashon Haydah. Yehudah acknowledges. Bital, he accepts upon himself the yoke. Vayigash Yehudi, he accepts upon the yoke even if he has to go to war. That's because he's the strength. He has, because he has Bital, because he's Haydah, he's ready to do anything to do what he has to do. Bital gives clarity. Bital says, this is what has to happen. And if I have to go to war for it, I'm going to go to war for it. Binyamin is coming home. No Jewish child is going to be left out. Like we said, through self-nullification, accepting the yoke, that makes you a stronger person. You don't get overwhelmed. To go in the way of truth. The way of Torah, mitzvahs. To educate our sons and our daughters. In the way of Torah, mitzvahs. And go till self-sacrifice. I gotta go. Yes, Aaron?
How do you start the process? And at what level? Because you said that you should keep going, like, go to another level.
First, it means you have to find the inner strength and the self-nullification to tap into that strength, to do whatever it takes to save the education of your children. That's what the Rebbe is saying. The education of your children have to go to the point that no matter what, our children's at Jewish education, even if it costs us much, even if it's difficult, we have to put away all our own agendas to make sure that we give a proper education to our children. That's the point the Rebbe is saying.
Or what level? I mean, like you said, there's Hasidic people and there's modern Orthodox and everything in between. So
yes, I hear that, but you go to the highest level that you can. The highest level that you can. The highest level and slowly with time, children bring their parents higher, and parents bring their children higher. The Rebbe wants a person to become the best person, the best Jew that they could become.
Okay.
Laila Tov, everyone. Good Shabbos and a good Chodesh. Happy Hey Davis.
Laila Tov. Good Shabbos, everybody.